Hello and welcome to Business 360. I'm Shireen Bhan. The headlines that we're tracking for you this evening: President Trump's tariff blitz continues to rattle global markets. Wall Street suffers its steepest decline in 5 years, wiping out $2.5 trillion in investor wealth. Stocks get clobbered across Asia and Europe. China hits back with 34% tariffs on all U.S. imports. Indian equities are not spared either. The Sensex and the Nifty dropped 1% each, while the mid-cap and small-cap indices down over 3%. Metal stocks fall the most on fears of a possible global recession that could hurt demand. Markets end the week nearly 3% lower. The Indian pharma sector's relief at not being subject to U.S. tariffs is short-lived. President Trump warns of never-seen-before tariffs in the not-so-distant future.
Yeah, so it was a sick patient and went through an operation on Liberation Day, and it's going to be a booming country, a very booming country.
President Trump plays down the overnight sell-off on Wall Street, defends his tariffs, says he's confident that the U.S. economy will come back stronger than ever, adds he's open to reducing tariffs if other nations offer something phenomenal. The statement contradicts White House officials who said there would be no negotiations on tariffs. Indian exports to the U.S. will see a 26% levy and not 27%. The White House clarifies that the tariff on India will be at 26%, as was presented by President Trump in his briefing, and not the 27% mentioned in the annexure published by the White House. American tariffs give impetus to the India-EU free trade agreement talks. Sources indicate both India and the EU will accelerate efforts to conclude the agreement by the end of 2025, adding that the EU is keen on an agreement that is fully WTO compliant and not a quick fix. The Company Law Appellate Tribunal dismisses a challenge by Ease My Trips Nishant Pitti to the liquidation of Go First, upholds the NCLT order of liquidation, allows Pitti to file a scheme to buy out the grounded airlines' assets. The budget session in Parliament comes to a close. Both houses adjourned sine die after having worked for over 110% of their scheduled time. 5 bills were introduced in the session and 10 bills were passed, including the Waqf Amendment Bill and the Oil Fields Amendment Bill. The Lok Sabha also passed the resolution on imposing President's rule in Manipur. The Supreme Court pulls up the Delhi High Court for ordering the takedown of a Wikipedia page critical of the High Court's decisions in the case between news agency ANI and Wikipedia. The Apex Court says courts cannot be so touchy about criticism. Prime Minister Modi meets Bangladesh's Modi-Yunus for the first time since Sheikh Hasina resigned and fled the country, urges protection for minorities. Yunus raises Hasina's extradition and the Ganga Water Treaty. Over 100 people killed across Gaza in the last 24 hours after multiple Israeli strikes. Over 30 dead in a school providing shelter to the displaced. More than 1,100 people have died since the ceasefire collapsed. All of that coming up in just a bit, but first to the big story that we are tracking today. President Trump's tariff blitz has rattled stock markets across the world. Wall Street witnessing its steepest single-day decline since March of 2020, with the Dow nosediving 1,700 points. Over $2.5 trillion worth of investor wealth wiped out. Tech stocks were the worst impacted. 7 large of the Nasdaq-listed tech giants, colloquially called the Magnificent Seven, have seen a market cap erosion of over $1 trillion. Apple alone there accounting for 30% of the loss. Across the Atlantic, the European markets also continue to tumble. The Stoxx European 600, a pan-European index that tracks stocks from 17 countries, down over 2% in trade. The index has fallen over 5% in the last 2 days over fears that the U.S. tariff strikes could push European economies into a recession. So a sea of red there across Europe. And the story was not different in Asia, with all benchmark indices in the red. The Japanese Nikkei, the biggest loser among the frontline indices there, and that has been the hardest hit. The man who sent the global markets into a tailspin, however, remains unfazed. President Trump laying down the market fall, saying he expected this. Take a look.
We'd love to get your reaction, sir, to what's going on in the financial markets today.
Well, I mean, it's to be expected where this is a patient that was very sick. We really inherited a terrible economy, as you know, with a lot of problems, including loss of manufacturing, plants closed up all over the country. You know, we've lost 90,000 plants since NAFTA, if you think of that. 90,000. It's not even believable. And about 6 million jobs. And so it was a sick patient who went through an operation on Liberation Day. and it's going to be a booming country, a very booming country. It's going to be amazing, actually. And we see it because we have trillions of dollars committed to come in. Trillions.
I expect most countries to start to really examine their trade policy towards the United States of America and stop picking on us. Stop saying that we can't sell our corn to India. Stop saying that we can't sell our beef anywhere. Just stop treating us so poorly if we are the great consumer of the earth. The United States buys everybody's products. We buy everybody's goods. You just have to treat us fairly, and that is the problem.
Howard Lutnick there. And stocks tumbling on Dalal Street as tariff tensions kept investors on the edge. More than 11 lakh crore rupees in investor wealth wiped out today, with the Sensex tumbling over 900 points. Nifty falling below 23,000. Both indices have lost 3% this week. That's the story on your screens. Prashant is standing by to wrap up the market action for us. Prashant, it's been quite a week for our markets, and of course, in line with what we are seeing happen globally as well. As we head into next week, what's the outlook? What's the mood like?
Well, the full force of what was announced showed up in markets today. Remember, last night was very, very dramatic for U.S. markets. The sharpest fall in the U.S. we've seen since, the depths of the COVID crisis. And the market here paid attention. The Nifty was down 1.5. The Nifty Bank, much better, relative outperformer in a big way. Mid-cap index down sharply, small cap the worst hit. And that's the way it turned out by 3:30. For the week, the Nifty is, by the way, down about 2.6%. This is Friday to Friday with a holiday, that is Monday, a holiday thrown in. Bank Nifty is unchanged, 0. So a big relative outperformer again for the week as well. Mid-cap index down 2, small-cap index down about 2.6%. And of course, bulk of this damage came through on the last day today. Now, sectors, the two I want to point out, IT, clear loser, but again, damaged last 2 days, 9% gone. Metals, 7.5% gone, but bulk of the damage came in on Friday and some on Thursday as well. Large caps, and where there was pressure, very few stocks were up. I think I counted 3 names with gains of about 1%. But Tata Steel, Hindalco were the big losers that we had today. There was Vedanta from the metals pack outside the Nifty, which came under pressure. Oil fell sharply. ONGC was a big cut. There were auto names like Tata Motors, which were down sharply. Cipla, L&T were some of the other large caps which came under a fair bit of selling pressure. Now, a repeat somewhat of what we saw with IT yesterday. Coforge down another 8% today. You had Mazgaon Dock, which was up about 7.5% lower. There was Bharat Forge, which was down 8%. Motherson was down 7.5%. Nalco was down sharply, 8.5%. Loris Laboratories, Pharma flip-flop. Yesterday, some were, of course, saying that, well, the exemptions have come. We pointed that out, that it looks temporary and tariffs will come. Trump confirming that it indeed will come. So today, the index lost about 3.5% itself. NMDC was down sharply. PG Electroplast, Oil India, Hindustan Zinc, Aarti Pharma. I could go on. Lots of volume on the downside. By the way, market breadth was 4:1 in favor of declines today. Some names on the upside. There was Kaveri Seeds, which was up 11%. There was something like but actually very little by way of volumes on the upside today. And I think that essentially is also a feature that we are closing this Friday out, this week out as well. I think weekend risk remains high. Those pharma tariffs have been promised. We'll see when that comes our way. And of course, US session with jobs report will also be important to track. Back to you.
Yes, we will be keeping track of all of that. Prashant, many thanks for joining us. It promises to be a difficult week. As Prashant was pointing out, pharma stocks have seen a rapid sell-off after President Trump threatened to impose, and I quote, never seen before tariffs. Now, he was speaking to the media from Air Force One and hinted at tariff cuts if countries, in his words, make phenomenal offers. Now, this is in contradiction with the White House officials who had said that they would not be negotiating on tariffs. Meanwhile, the U.S. has revised its tariffs for India from 27 to 26% overnight. According to the new version of the White House document, the same document had mentioned 27% tariffs on India yesterday. The rates were also changed for South Korea, Pakistan, Norway, Thailand, and a few other countries in just the last 24 hours. Here's President Trump on the possibility of tariffs on the pharmaceutical sector and Also, the possibility of driving down tariffs if, in his words, a country offers something phenomenal.
The Pharma is going to be starting to come in, I think, at a level that you haven't really seen before. We are looking at Pharma right now, pharmaceuticals as a separate category, and we'll be announcing that sometime in the near future, not too distant future.
Into deals with these countries if they're calling you.
It depends. If somebody said that we're going to give you something that's so phenomenal, as long as they're giving us something that's good. For instance, with TikTok as an example, we have a situation with TikTok where China will probably say, we'll approve a deal, but will you do something on the tariff? The tariffs give us great power to negotiate. Always have. I've used them very well in the first administration, as you saw, but now we're taking it to a whole new level because it's a worldwide situation.
Well, Donald Trump there warning about never-seen-before pharma tariffs. So how will India's pharma sector be impacted by a tariff on pharmaceutical exports to the U.S.? Vinny joins us now with the analysis. Vinny.
Now, we have analyzed some bit of a data. There's a note that's coming from CLSA highlighting the impact of different tariff rates. Firstly, let's talk about, the 10% rate. Now, for Dr. Reddy's, currently, obviously, the exposure that they have is somewhere around that 40%, more than 40%, in that 40-50% range. So then if Dr. Reddy's does see an impact of 10% tariff, it would be 12%. Aurobindo would see an impact of 15% in terms of EBITDA. This is for FY26 and FY27 if this is 10% tariff. And Zydus would also see an impact of 12%. When you see a 20% rate, it would come in at somewhere around 23% impact on Dr. Reddy's. Aurobindo would be 30%, Zydus would be 24%. Now, if you look at it in terms of the higher rates, that would be 30 and 40%. A sharper impact would come in, obviously. And for Aurobindo and Dr. Reddy's, Zydus, it would be in the range of around 35-36, and Aurobindo is the highest, 45% impact on that front. 40% is obviously very, very high impact that we're watching out for. So that is a major impact that comes in for these companies specifically. Why? Because the exposure that they have to US is somewhere in the range of 45 to 49% to 50% approximately at that level. Now let's talk about the other companies, that is Lupin, Sun Pharma as well as Cipla. For Lupin, Sun Pharma and Cipla, the exposure is below 40%. It's in somewhere around 32 to 40% in that range. So Lupin would see an impact of 11% if it was 10% tariff and 23% if it was 20% tariff. Sun Pharma 8 to 16%, a bit lower in terms of impact, while Cipla for the 10 and 20% would be 9 and 17, 30 and 40% would be higher. Now the main reason that CLSA is highlighting is that these companies see a high risk. Generic players specifically will see a higher risk coming in, and overall Indian companies contribute around 46% to the generic savings in terms of the US healthcare system. So that is a big amount and a big chunk that goes into the US healthcare system. And what CLSA believes that even if tariffs are imposed, we will be able to pass it on, and that is why they think that there will be a bit of a shift that we could see in terms of the share coming in across the globe, but surely important to watch out for in terms of the impact and how much will actually be passed on.
Vinny, many thanks for joining us. Well, we'll have to wait to see how this plays out. President Trump's tariffs are likely to impact India's exports of sin goods. Sources have told CNBC TV 18 that India has an early mover advantage as it has engaged in trade negotiations with the US. Just for context, sin goods are commodities perceived as harmful to society, including tobacco and alcohol. They're considered price inelastic, which means that their demand does not potentially drop even if prices continue to rise. Abhimanyu joins us now with more. Abhimanyu, how is the Indian government reading the situation?
Now, post-imposition of reciprocal tariffs by the United States, government sources have told CNBC TV 18 that while India is not happy with the tariffs, but no formal objection has also been made to the move. They also indicated that India already has an early mover advantage as it has already engaged in negotiations with the US for over 50 days for a bilateral trade agreement. Also, India is the only country where the US had sent a negotiation team for talks in the Trump 2.0 administration. Sources also cited several challenges in exports of shrimp, gems and jewelry, and also competition in the export of carpets compared to countries like Turkey. Opportunities have also been cited in several sectors like electronics due to tariffs on Vietnam and China, and for export of textiles due to the tariffs which have been announced for Bangladesh and Vietnam. Also, government sources added that reciprocal tariffs which have been imposed are based on trade deficits the US has with respective countries, and country-specific tariffs are largely aimed at generating revenue as well as creating negotiating leverage for trade ties and trade deals with several countries. Sectoral tariffs have been placed higher as per sources to benefit domestic industry in the United States, though the cost of production will increase in the United States, which is already not too competitive in terms of manufacturing in some sectors. It remains to be seen how the situation is going to pan out with respect to the impact of reciprocal tariffs on India as well as other countries.
Abhimanyu, many thanks for joining us. President Trump has also unveiled the new gold card visa. In a press conference, Trump said that the new card could be available in less than 2 weeks. The card will be more than $5 million and will guarantee the buyer permanent residency and citizenship eventually. The card features Donald Trump's image. The gold card has been touted as a premium alternative to the traditional green card, which also allows for permanent residency in the U.S. Meanwhile, public insurer LIC has dismissed the U.S. Trade Representative's claims of preferential treatment by the Indian government. The country's largest life insurer maintained that it is treated like any other insurance company by the government and regulators. LIC CEO and Managing Director Siddhartha Mohanty said the USTR's views stem from an incomplete understanding of Indian insurance regulations. Now, the Trump administration's reciprocal tariffs may accelerate the FTA talks between India and the EU. Sources have said that the EU is watching out for concessions that India may give the US. Parikshit is standing by with more details. Parikshit, the India-EU FTA has been a project that's been more than a decade in the making. What are your sources telling you now on how these negotiations are likely to be impacted by the ongoing negotiations that India is having with the US?
We hear from sources who are privy to the negotiations between India and the European Union that the US reciprocal tariffs will indeed have a knock-off effect on India-EU FTA talks. Sources say Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal and his counterpart, EU Trade Commissioner Maros Sefcovic, are going to talk again very soon. This is going to be a phone conversation on the FTAs, of course, but also the global tariff situation. The tariffs imposed by US on both EU and India is likely to accelerate efforts to conclude an FTA by the end of 2025. Sources say India is very keen to have an FTA by the end of this year. We learned that EU companies are very keen on investing in India, but technical barriers are holding them back. The European Union is also following India-US trade talks very closely, especially on agriculture and dairy sectors. Reduction of tariffs on cars and components would be one of the central pillars of the trade talks, just the way it is important for India-US talks as well. The European Union is looking for a fully WTO-compliant FTA with India, not a quick fix, and something that will serve the countries in the long term. Speaking to CNBC TV 18, the EU ambassador to India has said that reciprocal tariffs strengthen the rationale for an India-EU FTA and it will not define them. He further said that there is determination and high-level political engagement to get an FTA done soon. European Union actually wants to see the fruits of a harvest by the end of the year and more progress by next India-EU summit. The ambassador went on to say, while there is good progress so far, both nations continue discussing elements of a meaningful trade package, and European Union is looking to significantly scale up cooperation with India in clean tech, semiconductors, defense and security.
All right, so let's see how those negotiations take off. Many thanks for joining us, Parikshit. That's the latest on the India-EU FTA dialogue. Time for a short break, but up next, the Indian startup community responds after Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal calls for a reality check. That and more when we return. Laurus Labs will invest 5,000 crores to set up a bulk drugs manufacturing facility in Andhra Pradesh. The pharma company said the project will generate direct and indirect employment opportunities for 7,500 people. The land for the proposed plant will be allotted by the state government. Shares of HUDCO dropping in trade. This after the company's board approved a significant fundraising plan and increased its borrowing limit. The company plans to raise up to 65,000 crore rupees for FY26. Additionally, the board has approved an increase in HUDCO's overall borrowing limit from 1.5 lakh crore rupees to 2.5 lakh crore rupees. Now, Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal has asked Indian startups to introspect on the sectors that they choose to focus on. Speaking at the Startup Mahakumbh 2025, Goyal said that startups are focused on food delivery and hyper-fast logistics, while Chinese startups are involved in semiconductors and robotics. Startup founders across the country reacting to those comments. But first, here's what Minister Piyush Goyal had to say.
We are focused on food delivery apps, turning unemployed youth into cheap labor so the rich can get their meals without moving out of their house. And against that, what does a Chinese startup do? Work on developing electric mobility, battery technologies, and with that, they're today dominating the electric mobility ecosystem. We are very proud of what India has done. But are we the best in the world as yet? Resources are going only towards hyper-fast logistics. And look at what the other side is doing. Robotics, automation, machine learning, preparing themselves for 3D manufacturing.
Well, that is the Commerce Minister there at the Startup Mahakumbh, and the startup community reacting to those comments as well. The co-founder and CEO of Zepto, Adit Palicha, said nearly 1.5 lakh people earn a livelihood on Zepto within the 3 years since its inception. He also said the company's contribution to taxes and billions has been attracted as FDI. Palicha said, and I quote, "If that isn't a miracle in Indian innovation, I honestly don't know what is," end of quote. Meanwhile, Zoho founder Sridhar Vembu, before stating Goyal's comments as a challenge to engineers and technologies, listed down areas where the government lags. In a strongly worded post, investor Mohandas Pai writes, and I quote, "Minister Piyush Goyal should not belittle our startups," end of quote. Meanwhile, Paytm CEO Vijay Shekhar Sharma said Indian startups are now at least being compared to global peers, which did not happen 10 years ago.
10 years back, nobody would have compared us to anything. The fact that you're being compared means that you're the challenger, you're the next in the queue. Many Indian companies are not only making the deep tech, the AI, the semiconductor, and you talk about the investments, you read in the newspaper, listen to your own TV channel. The beauty is that India has vibrant ecosystem. There are different stages, different companies are doing it. The success of let's say the commerce companies or many other services companies acknowledges that customers will also make a viable business model. So India, what it proves is that India is a viable business model. Number two, India has talent and capability to build and expand on new things, and the world is expecting from us.
Well, reactions there coming in. Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha adjourned sine die, including the budget session, which began on the 31st of January. Data from PRS Legislative Research shows that the productivity of the session was over 118%. The Lok Sabha passed 16 bills, and the House's productivity was pegged at over 118%, while the productivity of the Rajya Sabha stood at 119%. The Waqf Amendment Bill and the Immigration and Foreigners Bill were among the key bills to be passed in this session. Prime Minister Modi met Bangladesh's Modi-Yunus for the first time since Sheikh Hasina resigned and fled the country. The Prime Minister urged protection for minorities in Bangladesh. Yunus raised Hasina's extradition and the Ganga Water Treaty. Now, the Supreme Court has pulled up the Delhi High Court for ordering the takedown of a Wikipedia page that's critical of the High Court's decision in the case between the news agency ANI and Wikipedia. The Apex Court has said that the court cannot be so touchy about criticism. Ashmit is standing by with more. Ashmit, this is an important order there that's come in from the Supreme Court. Take us through what the court has said.
Well, the court is extremely displeased with the Delhi High Court order directing for a takedown of a Wikipedia page. Of course, all of this pertains to a dispute between Wikipedia and ANI. ANI launching defamation proceedings in the High Court, saying that there's a page on Wikipedia which calls it a propaganda tool for the government, and this is what the fight is about. And now, in the midst of all of this, a fresh page appeared on Wikipedia which recounted the legal dispute between the two sides, and that is what the Delhi High Court has asked for a takedown on. Now, this is something that did not impress the top court. The top court said that judges of the Delhi High Court cannot be this touchy about this entire matter, that criticism is something that they need to take in their stride, even asking the Delhi High Court, in fact, making its observations as to why the Delhi High Court ordered such, how it could pass such an order in the first place when there's no finding of contempt against Wikipedia, when there's no finding of defamation against Wikipedia, yet takedown orders having been issued. In fact, recounting their own experience, the Chief Justice, the Supreme Court, in fact, recounted how there is severe criticism in the media of not just the judiciary, but also the top court, that the judges need to take in their stride. decides that what is written today may be forgotten tomorrow, but the conduct of the judges is here to stay, and that is something that the High Court, that the Supreme Court at this point is choosing to highlight. The proceeding in this case, we understand, will resume on April 9th.
All right, Ashmit, many thanks for joining us. At least 112 Palestinians have been killed in Israeli attacks across Gaza in the last 24 hours. The Israeli army also conducted strikes on schools, sheltering displaced families, killing at least 33 women and children. Israel has also ordered more forced expulsions from southern neighborhoods of Gaza City. The UN has estimated around 3 lakh Palestinians were forcibly displaced since Israel broke the ceasefire in Gaza on the 18th of March. According to the Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry, over 50,000 are confirmed dead, over a lakh injured since the beginning of the war. South Korea's suspended President Yoon Suk-yeol has been officially removed from office. The country's constitutional court voted unanimously to uphold his impeachment. This move followed his controversial declaration of martial law last December. The acting president will remain in charge until a new leader is elected within 60 days. And with that, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of Business 360. The news will continue here on CNBC TV 18. Stay tuned. We're back in a moment with more.